Hey, yo, this is Pastor Free, the lead pastor of the Abundant Life Church, and this is Greater Works Rewind.
When I rewind, replay all the things that made me who I am today. The good and the bad, the good and the bad.
If I had to describe my ministry as a preacher of the gospel, I would have to go all the way back to the age of 8. I preached my first public sermon 2 days before my 9th birthday. A little boy standing on a box in a room full of people at the Mount Sinai Missionary Baptist Church. I received my call in 3 distinct instances. Once I was laying on the floor in my Aunt Geraldine's living room watching TV, and it was like something out of a movie. The volume of the TV kind of went down, and I heard a distinct voice telling me to feed my sheep. Of course, as an 8-year-old boy, you don't understand what in the world is going on. I try to play it off, forget about it. Maybe it was a figment of my imagination. Another time that I remember, and I was recalling this the other day as I walked through my grandmother's house, that I was taking a shower in her bedroom and just kind of taking a shower, singing, doing what a kid would do in the shower. And the next thing I know, I'm preaching. I'm in a full-out sermon. I'm sweating. I'm all of that extra stuff. And it was just kind of playing around. And after I finished that, again, I heard that same distinct voice telling me to feed his sheep. That was the 3rd time, but I won't delve into that. And finally, I kind of went to my pastor, A.W. Anthony Mays, and I said, this is what's going on with me. My mom set up a time for me to talk with him, and I talked with him. He did the very best he could to talk me out of it. And I still use that same tactic to ministers that come to me and claim that they're called. Because listen, I believe that if you can run from it, if you can resist it, then you're not called, because God will make it so uncomfortable for you to run from him that you'll come to a point of surrender. So at the age of 8, February 25th, which is actually today right now, February 25th, that evening I stood on a box that had been constructed for my first sermon, and I preached a sermon called Promises We Think God Will Break. I'll never forget that day, and from that time on, I've been preaching, the journey of a boy preacher. Sometimes it was cute. I'm sure I made plenty of blunders and mistakes along the way, but it was a part of development and growth. By the time I was an early teenager, I was getting opportunities to preach all over the state and all over the country. In the national convention, I held offices on various levels, and so it gave opportunity for my ministry. I think I preached my first revival when I was like 13 years old. And so just that journey, high school kid trying to be a student, athlete, and preacher at the same time was definitely a very interesting period in my life. And then going on to college, I went to Houston-Tillotson University. School that's full of Christians, but is not always the most Christian atmosphere. And so trying to be saved in college, trying to be Christian in college was a task in and of itself. But even there, I was active in ministry, opportunities to preach. I was the assistant to the chaplain. And then finally, I served as the youth and young adult minister at Mount Sinai, where my task was to give leadership and pastoral care to youth. So yeah, my college experience, of course, was a defining moment. It was there that I met my wife. I kind of had a intersection or a crossroad in my ministry experience there, and kind of shaped who I was to become. When I graduated from Houston-Tillotson University, I went on to Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary, and it was there that I received the vision and the call to plant the Abundant Life Community Baptist Church. Now, that was 10 years ago, and this 10 years has been an amazing journey, but it's been filled with highs and lows, valleys and victories. And so I'm grateful for that ministry journey, if you will, from an 8-year-old boy to now a 35, about to be 36-year-old man, with plenty of stories about how God has kept me, used me, rebuked me, fired me, rehired me, the whole nine. If I were to kind of revisit an event that was a very difficult, challenging time, it really definitely challenged my faith. It would have been the death of my father. 1999, I was a junior in high school, and my father and I never had the best relationship because he kind of moved around a lot. I knew he loved me whenever he came around and we spent time together. It was obvious that he was my dad, that he cared for me. It was just life circumstances kind of kept us apart. But in the last year of his life, he had moved back to Austin and we were spending time together. I was driving at that point, so I was literally going to Men's Warehouse every day, which is where he worked, and we'd have conversations, we'd talk, we'd laugh, we were catching up for lost time. And one particular night we were at home and got the phone call that he'd been murdered. And so my mom and I got in the car, rushed over to my grandparents' house, and it was real. It didn't feel like it was real at the moment, but this was really happening. And that God had taken my father from me. And I think I probably could have handled it better if he had taken my father when our relationship was estranged, but it was like we were finally working on it. And it just seemed like the worst possible timing. During that time, I was a minister. I was a young preacher still. And I started coping, I guess, through kind of hanging out, drinking alcohol, just trying to deal with what was going on in my life, right? Because whatever hope I had in us having a great relationship was now literally gone. And I didn't know how to feel because I felt like God had robbed me of something. It took me a while to get to the point where I understood that God didn't take anything from me. He literally gave me an opportunity before he called my dad from this life. And so it took a while for me to kind of refocus. And I think sometimes that's what life does to us. Satan starts telling us negative things about our life circumstances and predicaments. And really it's a matter of perception or perspective. When I kind of reimagined, I was like, how awesome is God that I lived all those years without a real relationship with my father, but before he took him from this earth, he gave us an opportunity to reconnect, to know each other better. So it took me a while. I had to get over being mad at God, and I really was. I mean, I was pissed off. I was angry. I'd gotten to the point where I was like, I've been preaching for you since I was a kid. I lost my childhood behind this call, and I was angry enough to walk away. But that reshaping, that refocusing kind of caused me to recommit, reestablish my commitment to God. And I think at that point, my commitment to ministry went to another level. That's the most interesting question you could possibly ask. So in my Houston-Tillotson days, I mentioned, I alluded to earlier, that's where I met my wife, Kayla Freeman, and I'm so grateful for her. But it was at Houston-Tillotson where neither one of us planned to go. It was literally a God thing that redirected both of our plans, and we ended up at this HBCU in Austin, Texas. I met her my freshman year, and we kind of connected immediately. I joke about it all the time that my mother fell in love with her, so I didn't have a chance to, do anything different. And we got real close. We kind of knew each other's families and spent a lot of time together. And we were young Christians living for the Lord, trying to preserve our integrity, our walk before the Lord, but we were young and we were human. And so from time to time, we dibble and dabble in debauchery, for lack of a better term. Kayla can hear me, she back there in the kitchen, so I'm trying to not embarrass her. But anyway, so a couple of months, I guess, before I was to graduate. Now keep in mind, at this point, I'm the youth and young adult pastor at one of the largest and most prominent churches in our city, and I was actually in Houston at a convention youth staff meeting when she called me and she said, "Where are you?" And I said, I'm in Houston. She was like, "No, you can't be out of town." I'm like, "What's wrong with you?" She said, "We need to talk. Whenever you here, we need to talk." We need to talk. So she tells me over the phone, we need to really talk. I'm pregnant. And I said, "Wow. Okay." And so as soon as I could, I came home, went to her apartment that night. We had a long conversation. What I have not told you is that I was sure long before this that I was supposed to marry Kayla. There were some things in my own personal life and maybe in family dynamics, and we both knew what we were supposed to be doing, but I was being contrary, for lack of a better term. And God made it very clear that he wasn't going to force me to do anything, but he would make it uncomfortable for me to be out of his will. And so lo and behold, this woman that I love, but at this point we aren't even necessarily in a committed relationship, and she's pregnant, and I'm the Lord's preacher. I'm a young man, and I know that this is the type of scandal that destroys a person's life. I went and sat and talked with my pastor, and he asked me what did I want to do, and I said I want to marry her. I love her. And he said, well, I don't necessarily say that just because there's a pregnancy that there should be a marriage. I said, I know this has nothing to do with that. This is what God told me to do a long time ago, and I've been in rebellion. And so November 12th, we got married. 2004, November 12th, we got married. And I believe that moment was so defining, because prior to then I was so self-righteous. I was a boy preacher with a tenured ministry, some success for my age, and I had gotten to the point on the grounds of Houston-Tillotson where I was like a Pharisee, pointing out the flaws of everybody else. And in my mind, I had one issue. Every now and then I like to rub up on my woman. And to me that was small, but God literally in that moment showed me that it may have been small to me and I was being judgmental to other people, but I needed the grace of God, and he literally had to show me in that moment what the grace of God looked like. Kayla and I got married. Our oldest son was born not long after that. We have 3 wonderful sons that are gifted, talented, anointed, funny like their daddy, pretty like their mother. Well, not pretty, you can't call a boy pretty, but attractive like their mother. And not only that, we've got a 4th child from that, Abundant Life Church. And a lot of people don't completely understand what ALC is all about, but having gone through that season in my life, and God bringing Kayla and I together, it produced a place that's all about acceptance and grace and a positive church experience for those who are wounded and scarred and imperfect. And so ALC is not the type of church that everybody can get behind. It's not for everybody, but everybody's welcome here, regardless of what mistakes you made, what you've done. And sometimes we've come across seasons where people want to make issues about somebody's personal flaws and want to make it public. And my stance has been and will be that this is not a place where we're going to throw stones or condemn anybody. And that DNA came from the fact that I went through that major life storm. My wife and I went through that season where friends who we thought we could count on turned their backs on us, and God was faithful to bring us new friends in that moment. Opportunities were stripped away from us. People who had been calling me to preach all over the country stopped calling, and that was cool. But at the end of the day, it was that season in my life that shaped my DNA as a leader, as a preacher, teacher, and I'm grateful for what I've been through on the other side of it. I'm grateful for it because it broke me so that God could really use me. It's a great question. To me, I would start at the point of knowing that God preserves with a purpose. Whenever God keeps, he keeps for a reason, right? Pharaoh wanted to kill all of the Hebrew babies when Moses was born, and God shielded and protected him in the river and then in Pharaoh's house. Not for no reason, but so that Moses could grow up and then lead the children of Israel out of bondage. So remembering that you were preserved with a purpose, also understanding that you've got to forgive yourself, and then finally I would say it's very important to surround yourself with a circle of accountability. Everybody who will be used of God needs people around them that they can be honest with, people who are not too impressed by you to tell you the truth, and they'll help you to recover. They'll help you to get up. They'll remind you that you still got gift, you still have purpose, you're still anointed, God is still going to use you. And I thank God for those people he sent in my life that believed in me when I wanted to stop believing in myself. So to each and every person that has fallen, made a mistake, it's not the end. God gets treasure out of the trash all the time. I'm living proof that God can literally use your mistakes and your falls for his glory. And that's just how awesome he is. That's how amazing God is. Greater Works is a response of Jesus to his disciples who marvel over his ability to do. And his response to them was that they could literally do greater works than what they had seen him perform. And in that real way, I believe as people of God, we should cling to the fact that God literally has greater in store for us that we can accomplish. And sometimes we think so very small, so limited. When I consider my life journey in ALC, I had a big vision, a big dream that still has not been completely accomplished. But there have been little things along the way where God showed me that my dreaming was a little too small. I saw a growing vision with people coming from here, there, and yonder to be a part, but I didn't see a live recording. I didn't see recording 2 movies. I did not see authoring a book. Those things never would have crossed my mind. But Christ says to his people, when you put your hand in my hand, when you put your confidence in me, you're able to do greater than even what your mind can fathom. It's the same thing that Paul was saying to the Ephesian church when he says that you could do exceedingly abundantly above all that you could ask or think. And so, friend, I would say whatever it is that you think God is going to do in your life, think bigger than that. Think out of that box that God can do greater works in your life. So I've done a lot of talking about my personal life journey, and I'm extremely excited about the most recent thing to be birthed from my life. Free Indeed Ministries is a ministry that my wife and I have co-founded, and we've done several things over the years. And our latest release to be released on February 27th is my first public writing called God Wants Me. I'm super excited about this book because the things that I've been talking about in this interview are packaged in this little book. It talks about my ministerial journey, childhood, trying to find my own personal voice as the Lord's minister. I've been shaped and trained by those who had done it one way, but I felt God leading me to do another way. And I realized that God wasn't just calling a person, he was calling me, which meant he wanted my past, my experiences, all my idiosyncrasies, my swagger, my story, the whole 9. And so, friend, I do hope that you'll get an opportunity to pick up this book. You can find it on our website, freeindministries.com. We'll make sure that it's available on Kindle, iTunes, the whole 9. But whatever you do, make sure you get your hands on this little book. I promise you it'll bless your life. The foreword is written by Dr. Delvin Atchison. It's called God Wants Me, and I believe it'll bless your life. This is Pastor Free, and I don't know how many books I'm going to write, but I did this one right here, right? So if I never do it again, I can call myself an author because I wrote God Wants Me. I'm just extremely excited about this opportunity. It's been dope. I hope somebody's been blessed by my story. And I want to thank Greater Works for sitting me down and having this discussion, this talk, so that the world can kind of get to know Pastor Free a little bit better. This is an amazing media platform, and I'm excited to see the future growth of Greater Works Ministry.